Hi, everyone. Could you take your seats, please, and silence your phones? And no shade here. It's 7 o'clock in the morning for me. I'm from the West Coast, so if I fall asleep, someone will pick up on it here. We are on the panel that's called "Do You Remember Your First Time?" I'm Terry Shames. And I do remember my first time, actually. So I'm gonna ask each person here to introduce themselves. And in your introduction, I want to ask you when you first realized you wanted to be a writer. So let's get started with Alexis here on the end. And we only have 2 microphones, so we have to share.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexis Stefanovich-Thomson, and I'm the author of The Road to Heaven, and I haven't had any media training. And so I can say from a very early age that I wanted to be a writer. I just loved books so much. It was something of a dream of mine. And when I was about 20, I thought I was all ready, and I wrote a novel, full 80,000 pages, and I discovered it was really, really terrible. So I had some discouragement, solely my own, from my failure. But as I got older, I kept trying, and I've had such great encouragement from other writers in the community that it's really been amazing. So that's sort of my story. Outside of writing, I have a family. I live in Toronto, Canada. I have 2 kids who are grown now. For many years, I worked as a special education teacher in our education system, working with students with developmental disabilities, students with autism, and students with behavior issues. Now, I currently work at the Ministry of Education in Ontario, the province I live in, and write in the morning from 6:30 to 7:30 every day. Pass it over. Thank you, Terry.
Hi, can you all hear me in the back? Hi, my name's Anna Stolley Persky. I wrote The Jews on Elm Street. It's a short story. I'm a lawyer and a journalist as my day job, and let's see, I came to fiction writing very early on. I was very interested, and then life got in the way, and I went into law, and I went into journalism, and only in the past few years have I come back to it. I still have the same characters that I made up when I was a child, and they still haunt me, and sometimes they demand to be on the page, and I listen to them, and it's great to be here.
I should mention that Alexis is up for the Best Paperback Original, and Anna is up for the Robert L. Fish Memorial Award. So you want to go, let's see, what's the best way here? Kai, do you want to talk about yourself and when you first knew you wanted to be a writer?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Kai Lovelace. I born and raised in New York City. I'd always taken literature very seriously and read kind of obsessively, but I was involved in a number of other distractions and adventures in my life. I studied music in college and did some film scoring, did some producing of indie movies, but in the back of my mind, I knew that writing was something that was kind of slowly taking over my future. And about a decade ago, it became clear that I had to get to it sooner or later, but I wasn't really ready yet. I was still more distractions and more stuff to get out of the way. But about 5 years ago, I said, it's time to really start taking this seriously and doing it every day. For many, many years, I attempted things that were kind of just slop. But one day I kind of did a double take and I said, this isn't great, but it's not slop. And so I kind of slowly got to a point where I was more confident in my work, and I thought I was onto something.
And Kai is up for the Robert L. Fish Memorial Award as well for Head Start.
Oh, yes.
So, Audrey, why don't you talk about Audrey is up for the Best First Novel for The Mechanics of Memory.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm thinking about when my first time, and I think I've been writing since I could write, and I think as I became a teenager, and I was quite one of those angsty, angry teenagers, that I did a lot of writing then to sort of, I don't know, get through high school. And I have been told by readers that my main character has a level of snark that is very similar to someone who wrote the book. But what I did a lot in high school was write satirical short stories about the people in high school that I didn't like.
Yeah, my name is Ash Clifton. I am from Florida, so that says it all, I think. I guess I credit the educational system in Florida for getting me interested in writing. Not the school part, the busing part. I was bused an hour each way in middle school, and I started reading obsessively, mostly things like mysteries and science fiction and stuff like that. So, and then I decided maybe I shouldn't be a nuclear physicist. I should be a fiction writer, and that's it.
Okay, well, that gives us a little bit. I would like to find out from each of you okay, I had 6 novels written before I finally hit on the one that finally got published, and when I wrote it, I said, wow, this is it. So I want to know if you had a this is it moment when you were writing what you were writing. So why don't we start with you?
No, I don't think I ever did. I mean, if I can just get a good opening scene or a good scene anywhere, I feel like, yeah, okay, let's stick with this for a little while. And so, no, I always just start with, I guess, a situation or a character or maybe even a line of dialogue that I think, well, that's cool. I wouldn't mind writing about that and extending that and see where that goes. But no, I've never felt like, hey, this is a keeper, you know. I mean, and not until, you know, well into it anyway.
So even when you started Twice the Trouble, you didn't feel that way? I mean, who is Twice? Is he you? Is he, you know?
Oh, no, he's not me.
Okay,
Definitely
so
not.
talk about your novel.
He knows Kung Fu. I do not. Well, I mean, I'd written a couple of, you know, obligatory autobiographical novels that nobody liked. I kept getting rejection letters saying, you know, the writing's pretty good, but we don't like the main character that much. And I was like, okay.
That's not nice.
I don't like you either. So I decided to write about somebody very, very different from me. I mean, I feel like I have some good qualities in common with him, but he's an athlete, a former athlete. He's very strong. He's very courageous. He knows Kung Fu. He was a cop, whereas I'm a nerd, very bookish, very introverted. So it was a lot of fun to write about him, obviously. So I was thinking, yeah, this is fun. And then things just started to come together in weird ways that I was thinking, yeah, this is one of the better things I've ever done. So, yeah.
Yep. So how about you, Audrey? I'm curious to know, I would like to know where the mechanics of memory came from. Now, I know you said that you wrote snarky little stories about your classmates when you were in high school, but I want to know where did that come from? Where did the mechanics of memory come from?
So just to give you a quick, the mechanics of memory is about a woman named Hope who wakes up institutionalized in a really swanky wellness facility with no memory of her last year. And so she participates in these untraditional, unorthodox treatments to recover her memory. And as she does, she starts to question whether what she remembers is true. And so where it came from was I was listening to a NPR interview of a woman named Dr. Julia Shaw. She wrote a nonfiction book. She's a cognitive psychiatrist. She wrote a book called The Memory Illusion, all about how unreliable our memories are, and that basically everything we think is true might not be. And what she does is use this technique she has of implanting false memories to show law enforcement and work with law enforcement about interrogations and talk about how we as humans are just really susceptible to social pressure and the need to conform. And so she'll say to Ash, you know, oh, do you remember that time you robbed that bank? And Ash is like, I never robbed a bank. And then, but 3 months later, and through this entire process, she brings Ash back in and says, remember that time you robbed the bank? And Ash is like, oh yeah, and tells you everything. And I thought that was fascinating. And then I thought, because Dr. Shaw uses her powers for good, but I thought, what if you use this power for bad? And then that's where the book came from.
Well, there's a science fiction element to it. Do you read science fiction, or did it just sort of come to you?
Ash counted 2 Blade Runner references. I'm a sci-fi fantasy nerd. And there's a lot of tech in there. I used to work in ed tech, educational technology. And so I love technology. I like the idea that Black Mirror uses, if you've seen that show, where they take a piece of today's technology and then play it out until the very possible most horrible end. And I love that too.
Great. So Kai, Head Start. Talk to us about Head Start. How many stories had you had published before you had published Head Start?
I was very fortunate to have had 3 publications happen around the same time, which gave me a lot of confidence to barrel through longer periods of time where nothing was happening. But I remember reading somewhere, I forget exactly where, that I think this happened in California. Somebody stumbled upon what they thought was a crime scene, and they called the cops, and it turned out to be someone's Halloween decorations. So if you're a student of like Roald Dahl and Shirley Jackson and Tales from the Crypt, you go, well, that's a story. So then it was kind of just how can I use that, something so, you know, the story came out of there. But no, I do have a novel and about 15 or 20 short stories that are probably best left on the shelf. But I had a wonderful time writing them, and I learned a lot. So, you know, but the one thing I wanted to say quickly is I think during every single project I've ever tried, I have at least one moment where I think this is it, and another moment where I think this is really not working. So I think it's more, and then in retrospect, you can say, well, that one did work, and that one maybe not so much. It's part of just the changeable, you know, emotional attitude of the creative process, and maybe less about any objective truth.
Well, it sounds to me like the 3 of you are not plotters. Is that right? Do you plot your things out, all of you?
I'm a pantser.
Yeah.
I'm a plotter, spreadsheet, color-coded Sharpies, labeled Sharpies with the color on them. But I am currently writing the novel that I'm finishing right now. It's about a poker player who can stop time. It has been completely pantsed, and I am having the time of my life. And there's about 7,000 plot holes because I've written about a poker player who can stop time. So, but normally I am a plotter, spreadsheet maker.
That's wild. I thought once a plotter, always a plotter. So I'm surprised that you're winging it. So let's talk to Anna, the Jews of Elm Street. So where did this come from?
Hey, yeah, everybody can still hear me? Great. Jews of Elm Street started in my MFA program in a class taught by Art Taylor, and he said to do an exercise that had to do with taking mystery tropes and sort of turning them on their head. So I took the trope of the duo with the older, sort of more experienced, although she's really not, detective and her sidekick. So my main detective is a Holocaust survivor who has had a stroke, and she's underestimated. And I also was using this trope of the underestimated detective, which I'm a huge Columbo fan, so hats off to Columbo. And the sidekick was her granddaughter, a 16-year-old, 15-year-old girl. Actually, her age kept changing over all the revisions. And I really wanted to play off with that relationship. And so once the exercise was done, I started working with it, and I started switching viewpoints, and because I wanted to show their relationship and how they learned from each other. The question of when did I realize that it was something special? I mean, I became pretty invested in it, and I worked on it for over a year, and lots of small revisions, lots of big revisions. The title has had a million different renditions, and I don't know if I thought it was special. It was important to me, and it was special to me, and the themes that I was working with mattered to me.
Well, it was interesting because both of the short story writers have stories that are coming-of-age stories of one kind and another, and I thought that was interesting. And do you think that the committee was particularly interested in it for that reason, or what do you think stood out for them about your book? I mean, about your story?
I don't know if I can speak for them. I mean, I know what interested me. Coming of age is always a great starting point because you can have your person learn something. I also think, for me, what was so important was it's a love story. I mean, it's a mystery, but it's a love story, and it's a love story between a granddaughter and a grandmother. And it's based in their shared heritage, it's based in the importance of family, and that really meant something to me, and I hope it was felt by others.
Yeah. So, Alexis, tell us about The Road to Heaven, and how you've said that you had some things that you had written before that you did not think were successful, and what made you think this one stood out a little bit?
Thanks so much for that question. And you said you were on your 6th novel before you got published, and I thought I was going to come here and I thought I was going to win with my number, or maybe lose. I don't know what the right word is, but certainly I'd written that very unsuccessful, unpleasant. I didn't even like the person who wrote it book in my 20s. And then later in my 20s, I had a friend who said to me, we had 2 other friends who were graduating from law school, and he said, let's write them a mystery story about the 2 of them doing battle in the courtroom, and we can give it to them as a graduation gift. And so the 2 of us did write a book, and it was probably about 60,000 words long, and it had these 2 actual people in it, and my wife, who can do anything, made a book and bound it and sewed it and put a hardcover on it and everything, and there were 2 copies. We kept a 3rd copy for ourselves. We gave it to our friends. They're still speaking to us to this day, so that's the good news. And that was such a joyous time, and it was so great that we decided to embark on another co-writing project. And he and I wrote a book about an accountant who leaves his work to become an environmental terrorist. And then someone said, life gets in the way, and at that time in our lives, both of us were getting, work was more serious, families were starting, things were getting busy, and we did finish it, but it never really went anywhere. And then about 10 years ago, I had a change of careers, and so I had a little more time in my life, or a change of jobs, and a little more time in my life, and my kids were getting older, and I almost felt sane. And so there was a little time, so I started writing again, and I wrote a sci-fi novel about someone who it was called Negative Space. He goes through a machine that sends him to, charges all the ions negatively and sends him to a parallel universe, and then when he gets there, it's parallel, so it looks a lot like this one, and he spends the rest of the book trying to figure out whether the machine actually worked or not, whether he's in a different universe or not. And so that was a bit unpublishable, and then I thought, I'd try something different, so this one I cheated. I just took the plot of The Wings of the Dove, the Henry James novel, and just rewrote it with very different characters, and that one is okay, but again, I don't think it could. Actually, I did send that to 2 friends and said, what do you think? Could I send this to an agent? And one of them got back to me and said, no. And then my wife, she said, "Why don't you write a mystery novel?" And that's where The Road to Heaven came from. I was looking at writing a noir mystery that happens in Canada, which I really don't feel we have a whole bunch of. I think Giles Blunt is great, so maybe one, but I really felt like I wanted to do something noir in Toronto, in Canada, in the neighborhood right where I live, and so I used someone like Ross MacDonald with his really compressed time frame. My book takes place in about 36 hours, all of the action in the book, and then also the way, again in Ross MacDonald, that it's some past trauma that is causing all the current issues, and so you are going back in time, even though the action is taking place in a very compressed time. And I wanted to set it in Toronto. I even came up with a catchy hook to try and sell it to a publisher or an agent. I called it Maple Noir. I thought if they can have Scandi Noir in Sweden, if they can have Tartan Noir in Scotland, why can't we have Maple Noir in Canada? So that's how I came to be here, and it's just been so great. Thanks, Terry. Oh, can I say one more thing? I also, Kai said, I feel like. I feel this is it, and both this is not it about anything I've written, and I would say 100% yes, and I would just add to that like when I, type the words "the end" and I'm finished with a book, I'm thinking this is the greatest thing ever written. Damn, I'm good. And then it gets accepted by a publisher, and then it's going, and as publication day comes closer and closer and closer, it's just like by the day it's actually published, I'm just like, is there a hole in the ground I can crawl into, because this is just terrible. So that's sort of the graph of my experience of those emotions. I don't know if Kai experiences them the same way.
So it sounds like pretty soon we can hear a conference coming up called Bloody Toronto, like the Bloody Scotland ones. So were you surprised when you got, you don't really have to go at length about this, but were you surprised when you got nominated for an Edgar?
I think I don't need the mic. I'll just say yes. It's such a great honor. So yes.
Yeah. And how about you? Were you surprised about this?
Yeah, I was completely blown away. I had no idea that it was coming or a possibility even. I was already so thrilled that the story had been published. So for me, I've been blown away by the entire experience.
Let's just go down the line. Were you surprised, or did you say, I expected this?
I was shocked. Completely shocked. I stand by the story, but there's so much out there that I didn't anticipate this, but it's, very grateful.
I'm still not sure it actually happened, so I actually keep checking my email, expecting Marjorie to be like, just kidding, don't actually come to New York. And I still have the website bookmarked because I check every so often to make sure they haven't printed a retraction. But the morning that they came out, I woke up and I checked my email, and Jim Latoile was like, congratulations. And I said, for what? What did I do now? So yeah, shocked.
Yeah, what she said, pretty much. I did actually look at the long list because I got an email saying, your publisher has submitted you. And I started, downloading samples from those books, and I was like, damn, I'm not going to be in the short list. There's no way. So yeah, I too am very honored.
So I have a question that has always interested me, and that is, and let's start with you, Ash. I think that over time, writers develop sort of a theme about their writing, something that sort of follows through, carries through with their books. Do you have something like that you feel like is not, I hate to say message, but message?
It's a message.
Yeah.
I would never set out to write about this, but just looking back at my stuff, I see that, there are some common threads. One is this idea I have in my personal life is, why is there so much friggin' evil in the world? And how can you possibly be a good person when there's so much evil, and it's so powerful, and the deck is so stacked against everybody? So yeah, if I had to pick a theme, that would probably be my theme.
go for it. Yeah.
Samantha Downing, the thriller writer, who I absolutely adore and have been lucky enough to get to know and fangirl for the last couple years, talks about her books being stories about, serial killer story about blank. So her very first novel, Edgar Nominated My Lovely Wife, is about a husband and wife serial killer team and is just devilishly dark. But she calls it a serial killer story or a mystery story about marriage. And all of her books are, mystery story about bunch of killers about something. And that's how I've started to think about my books. I have The Mechanics of Memory, to me, is a love story, even though it has 100 million other things in it, corruption, tech, VR, all of those things. And my second book, which is currently looking for a home, is a thriller, twisty thriller about loss and grief. And this poker player one is actually a twisty thriller about the bonds between siblings. And so that's what I like to think about in each book. But like Terry said, they kind of don't arise until you're done and you look back. But I think across so far these 3 that I've written, it's really important to me to have representation. And so all of my protagonists are Asian female women. There's a very diverse cast of characters in all of my books. But I just don't think there's enough of it out there, even though the world of publishing is changing. It's kind of not changing fast enough for my taste. And so theme-wise across all of my books is just a little more representation of, the culture I come from.
Yeah, and I also want to say that there's more than one love in your The Mechanics of Memory, and I really like that. It was not just a love story, but there was more than one kind of love. It was very nice. So talk about your thematic hopes and dreams.
Well, I don't think too consciously about that sort of thing, but identity and perception factor into my stories a lot, I think. Most of the conflicts that I think up tend to involve the disparity between what a character thinks they are, thinks they're doing, and what they're really doing. And not that they always learn something, usually they don't actually, but something happens because of that disparity that hopefully the reader can pick up on, even if the characters don't necessarily perceive it.
Let me just say that's heartbreaking because your story is so wrenching, and it has that element to it of the young boy not knowing who he is and exactly what's going on, and I think it was just wonderful. So yeah. Your themes.
Yes, my themes. I'm actually very conscious about my themes, and I work with them, and I see same themes playing out in my work. One is the weight of ancestral heritage, the weight and joy, really, of ancestral heritage and religion, and that plays out, and then also the pros and cons of assimilation. And I actually recently discovered, and probably I'm super late to the game, with the Rabbi Small series, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I'm interested in too, because those same themes are played out in his books, so yeah.
Thank you. So in my series, again, I don't consciously think of themes too much, but a couple of ideas that are running through them. One is the idea of coming of age in The Road to Heaven. It is a very young detective. He's just 24, and unlike some of the more hard-boiled and cynical detectives, he's really straddling the line between innocence and all the positives that suggests, and ignorance and all the negatives that suggests. I'm also interested, I would say, in failure, and that's something I explore a fair amount, and my young detective, Patrick Bird, fails a fair amount, and sometimes even fails in his successes. I would say, in a general sense, I think mystery writing is often, please don't take this the wrong way, but conservative. It's in a sense that the world order has been shattered by a crime, for example, a murder, and then there's a resolution. The murder is solved, and the world order can go back to the way it was. I think that the noir writers perhaps questioned that, and they said, does the world order go back to the way it is? Are things better? Are things solved? Or are we left with a very, very imperfect world, either because of this crime or just that's the way it is? And then the last theme, I sort of talked about Toronto a little before, but I would really love to write a sort of social history of Toronto through crime writing. Someone I could, only dream of ever aspiring to be someone like Michael Conley, and what he does in Los Angeles I just think is absolutely amazing, and so I dream of doing something like that. My second book, which is coming out in about a year's time, a little less than a year, is set in Toronto. This one is in 1965. The second one is in 1968, and it actually revolves around the true story that James Earl Ray, after assassinating Martin Luther King, lived in a Toronto rooming house and got a Canadian passport before traveling to England, where he was eventually arrested. So it centers around that rooming house and James Earl Ray's time there. So those are the themes. Thank you for the question.
It struck me as I was reading all of their work that all of them write about, there's a social construct in all of their work, a social consciousness. And I think that is sort of new in the mystery world, that this deep sense of social justice is important. And what I want to ask you is, do you have writers that you admire that you, let's start with you, Kai. Do you have writers you admire that you feel like you would like to emulate?
Yeah, there are way too many to begin spouting names, but one name that comes to mind was Donald Westlake. Yeah. When I first started reading him, I think that was a major domino in the process of, well, I want to try to do this myself, and especially the way that, not just him, but the idea of approaching narratives from either a very dark, kind of stoic, grim place, or a very lighthearted, kind of zany, comic, farcical way, or somewhere in the middle, but seeing the same world essentially through those two different lenses. I usually get inspired with an idea with one of those two major moods. Either this is going to be really fun and ridiculous, or this is going to be really miserable and sad. Yeah.
So you start out with a thought or an idea or a scene or what starts you off on a story or a book?
For me, the core of an idea is an emotional timbre, a mood, and then usually a character comes after that, and then a plot after all that. But I remember just really quickly, I wanted to say that I'm really obsessed with movies. I watch a lot of movies, and when I was a kid, I went through a phase of watching Treasure Island like every day, the 1934 version with Jackie Cooper and Wallace Beery, and there's a scene where Blind Pew, the nasty old pirate, is really enraged because the kid has pulled a fast one on him, and he's screaming about how I'm gonna get my hands on that kid, I'm gonna tear his arms off, I'm gonna gouge his eyes out. And I was like 6 years old and remember being like just mortified and terrified by that, but in such I was so involved with the narrative that it was like this feeling of like, I want to go home, I'm in over my head, but it's the greatest feeling of all time. So I just want to bring that feeling to other people, that I want to go home, I'm scared.
That's fabulous. Okay. I've forgotten what the question was. Okay. Audrey, do you have anyone in particular, and how do you start a story? Yeah.
Oh, that's so hard. And the second I say a name, then I'm going to leave and wake up and be like, oh, I should have said, that's way smarter. But someone who comes to mind is Lev Grossman. I read his Magicians trilogy once a year. So he's just got such a good blend of darkness and fantasy and funny, and I love 80s pop culture references, and he does those too. What was it? How do we
And
start?
how you, what starts a story for you? A character or a place or just a thought, a scene, whatever?
I think it has to be a character in a situation, and then I sit down and, like, for instance, this poker player who can stop time, which is just ridiculous. But like, I wrote a really short story about it, 2 chapters, and then I thought, oh, maybe this is actually going somewhere. So 85,000 words later, it became a story. But I think it always starts with a character in an odd situation, and then I determine what bad things I can do to that person and make their life miserable.
How about you, Ash?
Well, I guess regarding the writer one, I have kind of a weird mix of 2. One is Rex Stout. I'm a huge fan of his. But after, I think Alexis mentioned having a kid. After my kid was born, spending a lot of time rocking him in the rocking chair, I would read all the Rex Stout novels. They were really small and inexpensive. So, and I enjoyed them a lot. And on the other end of the spectrum is a guy named Robert Stone, who I don't know if anybody talks about anymore, but he was a National Book Award winner in the 70s. He writes pretty heavy stuff, but I reread one of his books, Dog Soldiers, every year.
Did he write Out of Bridge Reach?
Yes, he
Yeah.
did. And he didn't write a lot, but all his books are really good. So on the pretentious end, that's who I see myself as when I'm
No, but
when
he
I'm
writes
writing.
adventure. He writes
He did.
adventure.
He wrote,
It's
yeah, he wrote.
intellectual adventure, but
Well, he was super smart, yeah, and
Yeah.
he was a really good
yeah.
lecturer, too, until his later days. But anyway, so those are my 2.
Okay, good. So, you guys.
Hi, yeah, I'm a big mystery reader for sure. I mean, certainly contemporary authors, Laura Lippman, hats off to her right now, Louise Penny, but I've been going backwards in time a little bit, just sort of going where my curiosity leads me. So again, the Rabbi Small series, I hadn't heard of them, I don't know why. And Faye Kellerman, sort of the same thing. As to sort of what motivates me writing-wise, I get an idea into my head, or a lot of times characters, again, haunt me. So I have this recurring character I started writing about, I think, in high school. Her name's Dara Suzanne Gold. She's a lot of trouble. She's very, very mischievous. And she keeps popping back up and saying, hey, remember me? You need to write about me. I'm still at camp, and I'm still causing trouble. So, yeah, and sometimes other characters haunt me. Sometimes they're just from my past. Sometimes they're things that occur in the news. I have a Luigi character right now who's walking around. So that's where I get it. And then I put on music, and I usually sit there with my music and let the music sort of take me where I'm going.
I too, I read a lot of those are mysteries and crime novels. I really love all of the classics and reread them frequently, the Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett. I also, Ross MacDonald, James M. Cain, I like a lot. To speak of something more contemporary, a writer I really admire is James Ellroy. He's someone who I think has really evolved as a writer. His later stuff is very different from his early novels, and to see that evolution is very impressive. He's someone who has really developed his own voice, and an absolutely unique voice in writing. He's someone who's crossed over from just crime fiction into a literary world where people like Don DeLillo are saying, potentially the best American writer. So he, and I'll also say, he's not easy reading, both from the way he writes and also the content of what he writes. But he, it's very unique and impressive. So he's certainly someone I look at. Not that I could ever try and write like that, but it's interesting, and I love reading it. So that's one. And then around where do ideas come from? I think I would say also, I feel like sometimes I'm looking to a feeling, and that's where I might start. But for a longer work like a novel, that's a little more complex. I also look at ideas about trying to think about pushing boundaries. So I'll just give you an example of, and this is one of my failures, one of my many. Like I thought about, well, what's a crime novel? Do you need to have a crime? What would be the lowest level of crime you could have? And so I tried to write a story about a jaywalker, but it didn't actually go anywhere. But like so sometimes my ideas are like trying to just think of things that maybe haven't been done before.
I love that.
I read a science fiction story about a jaywalker. It was great. Yeah, and they were punished very, very badly. One last thing, just for the aspiring writers out there, what advice would you give yourself when you were starting out? If you could go back and whisper in your ear, what advice would that be? And let's start back with you, Alexis.
I seem to be talking a lot about failure, but I mean, you certainly need to experience failure. You need to have a tough skin, but something that I was making fun of myself of having, written 5 novels that are absolutely never going to get published. But I think like some of the best advice you can have is just to write. Like in any other profession or craft, if someone's going to, play in the NBA, they need to practice their shot every day. If you want to be a writer, then I think maybe you just need to practice every day. So writing and reading would be the 2 things, and I guess the third is maybe going public, sharing your work with others, and looking at their work also. So that would be the advice.
Yeah, I'm going to go off of that. I mean, I think we're all our own worst critics, and we can get discouraged and talk ourselves out of writing. I know I can all the time. And so I try to be like nice to myself and be like, yeah, this is maybe, this is fine, and just keep going. Versus like, oh, I hate this paragraph, and I just excise the paragraph, and you're not going forward that way. At least I don't.
I'm going to chime in here, and my advice to people is take yourself seriously. I didn't take myself seriously for a long time as a writer, and I would just write things and say, oh, that's good enough. Well, it wasn't good enough until I took myself seriously and said, you're either going to do this or you're not, so take yourself seriously.
I don't mean to counter what you're saying or be reductive. It's just the phrasing. It's just the phrasing. For me, I would say get over yourself. Just in the sense that, I mean, I agree with you, but just in the sense that your moods, my moods while I'm working, need to be taken with a grain of salt. And for me, it's, again, not to be reductive, but it almost is a pass-fail situation. Did you get your hours in today or not? It was a good day, it was a bad day, it really doesn't matter, because that stuff is very changeable. But for me, the overall satisfaction of looking back at what I have managed to produce in the last 6 months or so, especially working full-time, is a much more sustainable, nutritious way of looking at it than, well, is this one working, is that one not working, did this one get rejected, did this one not? So.
Don't you think, though, that setting yourself goals and looking at what you've done is a way of taking yourself seriously, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So, go for it.
I echo what everyone said except for this thing going on here. And I think the quote is Gloria Steinem, but I'm not positive. But it's that the only thing I don't want to be doing something else is writing. This is Gloria Steinem, or whoever said this, said it way better. But the only act that I don't feel I want to be doing something else is when I'm writing. And there's so many other things that you call writing that aren't writing. There's the rabbit hole of research. There's there's looking for the right adjectives. There's, Google thinks that I'm having a baby because I'm always looking at baby names or male names or female, But there's a lot of that are sort of the trappings of writing that have to be done, but it's very easy to spend several hours doing that and not actually have put words on the page.
Yeah, I would just say finish the first book as quickly as you can, because even if it's not great, it teaches you how to do the second one, and you know how you can do things, what works for you. So just take like 6 months and finish the first one, because I spent, I don't know, a ridiculous amount of time writing my first book, and it still sucks. So anyway.
So mine was more finish the damn book. So do we have any questions? We have just a few minutes for questions. Yes.
What are your biggest challenges writing?
Whoa, what are your biggest challenges writing? And Ash, let's start with you.
Thank you. Well, I still have a day job, so that's the biggest one, just time and energy. So I mostly write at night, and everything else is over. About 8 o'clock I start, and I get in at least an hour or two. So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think just making that time to actually, as Terry said, be serious about it. And because you can't become a better writer if you don't actually write. And you have to make it a habit. And it's hard to find that time to do that because we all have to pay the bills and have kids and dogs and, things, other life things that need your attention. But making it a priority and a daily habitual priority can sometimes be a challenge.
Kai.
Well, besides finding the time, when you're working full-time, I would say that every single aspect of it is extremely grueling. But there are times when things come a little easier, but then you look back and that is not always the best stuff, so. But making sure that everything kind of clicks together finally at the very end is always seems to be. I feel like I'm an easy street after the first draft, but it really is only the beginning of the pain.
Well, I had an agent who taught me something that no one has ever taught me, and that was when I would send her a book, she'd say, "You're not done. You need one more twist." So that was always my challenge.
So time, for sure. I'd say my characters sometimes want to go in a direction that I don't want to go in, and so we are often fighting with each other.
I would say just like going back to the take it seriously, I would also say like I feel like you do need to love it, and like I get so much pleasure out of just writing, and so I don't see it as a chore in that way. One of the things I find really difficult is a lot of time you're on your own and you're writing, and when I'm editing, like sometimes I'm looking at a sentence and should I take this word out or should I leave it in? And there's just no way of knowing. And you do it one way and you read it again. And I mean, I know I edit like from one draft to the next where I've taken something out and the next draft I put it back in. So like I mean, that's probably when you know that you should stop and move on. But there's just no way of knowing. Like you're aiming for perfection, but who knows what that is? Like, I don't know.
How did you connect with your agent?
I don't have one. Looking.
Yeah, like most things in my life, I did it backwards. Like I wrote a novel, and then I realized I'd never got anything published. No one was ever going to look at me, so then I wrote short stories, and then I got some things published. Then I got my novel published. Then an agent contacted me. But so backwards, I don't know.
Do you have an agent?
I do not have an agent.
I met my agent at the San Francisco Writers Conference in this horrible, horrible, soul-sucking hellscape called speed dating. It was, well, yeah, horrible, soul-crushing hellscape. So, but I'm still like PTSD from that, can you tell? But FaceTime with agents is important because they have their, I mean, it's not like this literally anymore, but their email inboxes, their query trackers, everything, they probably get 100, 200 submissions a day. And so for yours to be able to rise to the top, FaceTime and having them know you is, can make a difference.
Yeah, I went down the traditional route for a long time. I sent out a couple hundred queries, I guess. Finally, I did a pitch war. I don't know if that's a familiar thing, but you have 7 lines or 6 lines to pitch your book, and you send it to a bunch of agents in one place. And my agent Cindy Bullard, she got back to me and she said, "Hey, this sounds cool." So after all those letters, that 7 lines, that's what finally clicked. So thank God for it.
Okay, well, we're done. Thank you to my wonderful panel, and thank you for coming.